You're watching Cinepolitics with me, Faiza Ahmed. Coming up on today's show, we'll be looking at Steven Spielberg's Lincoln, starring Daniel Day-Lewis as the man himself, Abraham Lincoln. The First Lady has been portrayed by Sally Fields, and Tony Kushner is responsible for the screenplay. Now, the film is set during the final months of Lincoln's term in office. The US is caught up in a bloody civil war between the South and the North, and the future of slavery has got the Republicans and Democrats tearing each other apart. Lincoln is hell-bent on uniting the country and getting the 13th Amendment passed to abolish slavery. Now, despite being nominated for several awards and garnering praise from many film critics, Lincoln has been criticized by historians for its accuracy, many questioning how true to history it really is. The absence of black leaders has also raised a few eyebrows. So just how accurate is Steven Spielberg's vision of history? And did Lincoln really care about the slaves? Let's take a look. Joining me today to discuss Lincoln, we have Ken O'Keefe, activist, and Maria Duarte, film critic for the Morning Star. Welcome to the show, both of you. Now, this was a very long film with a lot of dialogue that required a lot of concentration. Maria, was it a political drama for you or just a Lincoln biopic?
Well, you know, what Steven Spielberg delivers is basically a very comprehensively long and compelling history lesson in how Lincoln basically passed the 13th Amendment, i.e. the abolition of slavery, and how that came about. I never really expected it to be a warts and all about Lincoln himself, because he's considered as one of the greatest presidents that America's ever had. So, you know, there wasn't going to be a hatchet job. And also, this is a film which clearly screams awards all the through it, particularly with Daniel Day-Lewis's incredible performance. And yes, it was one monologue after another, and thank goodness for Sally Field and Tommy Lee Jones that added spice and heart and a bit more light and shade to it.
Apparently there were 150 speaking parts, which is quite a lot. Maria, how do you think that Spielberg has portrayed Lincoln in this film?
Well, he's portrayed him as a complex man and a hero to the common people, to the common man. And like I said, he was never ever going to portray him in any other way, basically, because he would have probably been lynched, I would have thought.
Ken, I want to bring you in here. How accurate was this portrayal?
It was another nauseating example of Hollywood propaganda, and it really has no resemblance to the truth. In fact, there was another Lincoln movie that came out earlier that year, Lincoln the Vampire Slayer, and I reckon that there was just about as much...
I know where this is going.
I'm not kidding when I say that I think there's about as much evidence to support Lincoln as a vampire slayer as there is about him actually wanting the end of slavery and freeing black people. There's no historical truth to that whatsoever, and Lincoln's life is a testament to the fact that he was a man of his time. He used the word repeatedly in his life. He never had any kind of epiphany and changed his perspective. He never cared anything about freeing the slaves. This was all about concentrating power, maintaining the Union, and concentrating more power in the federal government. And the implications of that bloody war, civil war, and concentration of power into the federal government, we see to this very day. And that's why I'm not going to forgive Spielberg or the propagandists of Hollywood for this kind of junk, because it perpetuates myths that cause great harm in this world.
Well, because I have a letter from the president himself to Horace Greeley where he says, "My paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union, and it is not either to save or destroy slavery." And then he goes on to say, "What I do about slavery and the colored race, I do because I believe it helps to save this Union."
He was a politician, you know, and things haven't changed over the years, clearly, because we see in the film the machinations that are carried out, the wheeling and dealing, the fact that he employs three, they look a bit like hoodlums really, but three guys that went out and procured the votes under whatever means possible. And what's interesting is that Lincoln's right-hand man and spin doctor says to them, or says to Lincoln, "We'll send these guys out and therefore our hands won't be tainted, i.e. we won't have to speak to these Democrats." So nothing's changed really.
Do you think this film will have that mass audience appeal? Because it is quite US-centric, and
I don't know. I mean, I think obviously this is aimed at an American audience, and they will get more out of it than other people around the world. But it's a Hollywood film, so like every other kind of film that's based on history, you have to look at it with an open mind, you know. The actual political dealings is fascinating, what happens in the House of Representatives, the way that all the politicians deal with each other. You know, that's what lifts this film up. But to see it as, you know, this is how Lincoln was, I think you have to take it with a pinch of salt.
Okay, well, let's pause there. Let's go to our next clip from the film. Okay, so that was a dramatic scene. We've just seen Tommy Lee Jones, who plays Thaddeus Stevens, in there. Do you think that this Lincoln movie corrects his image? Because historically, I believe that he was shown as a villain.
Well, you know, there's no question in America there's a cult surrounding the mythological Lincoln, and it protects him very, very well. And I suppose there are many important reasons why the powers that be want to maintain this myth, because the American people in general don't want to face many facts about their country. Hell, they're not even able to understand the fact that it's not actually a democracy, it's a republic. And under a republic, the states are supposed to have rights. In fact, the federal government, as the original founding fathers envisioned the United States of America, i.e. nation states of America, was that the states would be able to determine their own political reality, and that the federal government would only have so much power as would be required for it to maintain certain duties. Instead, what we have, and that's where the implications of this film are quite profound, is the beginning of the concentration of power to the point that we see the American empire now, at this point in time, running roughshod over the world. If that federal government had been kept in check and the states had been allowed to make up their own minds and decisions, slavery would have ended. And let us not mistake the fact that America is the only nation in the world that had a bloody civil war that had to deal with slavery. Every other country in the world managed to do this without such a bloody war, and they did it before the United States as well. So Lincoln was not this great emancipator. In fact, the Emancipation Proclamation did not free any slaves at all. It only provided the means for slaves in the South that were rebelling against the Union because they were trying to increase taxes and so on and so forth. That's the only people that it dealt with. It didn't do anything to free slaves up north, and there were slaves there as well. So really, there's just so many myths, and again, the implications of maintaining these myths is that the American people and others around the world continue to be in the dark about the real reality of American history. And I think that's an important subject for us to be aware of.
I think when I was watching this, I mean, once the film finished, I thought, well, question for Spielberg, what about the African American leaders, the African slaves? They had leaders, the likes of Frederick Douglass. Where were they in this film?
But the thing is that all the black characters that you see in this film are all very passive and waiting for their white masters to free them, which is quite a dangerous message to send out.
And the opening scene where this is probably a spoiler, but the interaction between Lincoln and the two African slaves, would that really have happened?
No, I mean, they wouldn't know the Gettysburg Address, let alone be able to recite it. And there's the bit where one of them says, you know, in 50 years we'll have black captain, in 100 years we'll have the vote. And I was then waiting for, in 150 years, we'll have a black president. And I gasped, I thought, thank goodness that he didn't go that far. But I was just waiting for that line.
Ken, what do you think about that scene?
It was a nauseous scene, and it's the first scene in the film, and there is simply no way that black men would have had an audience with the president in that kind of context and actually been effectively sort of chastising Lincoln for more equality not coming that much quicker. It's ridiculous, and I can see how it would work on much of the American population because it's been so dumbed down that most people will swallow whatever is put into their mouths, no matter how much rubbish it is. And that was an absolutely ridiculous scene, and there's more such scenes like that.
We have two other characters, Miss Keckley, who has been assigned to Mary Todd, Lincoln's wife, and Lydia Hamilton Smith, who is linked to Thaddeus Stevens. Maria, how do you think they've been portrayed in this? Because from what I've read, they're apparently very strong women, or they were very strong women.
Yeah, again, very passive characters, you know. The Thaddeus is
Lydia.
Amazing. She was supposedly a housekeeper, but was his partner, his other half, and yet, you know, he still had her as a housekeeper.
We're going to come back to you, Maria. Let's go to our next clip from the film. There was Sally Fields as Mary Todd. How do you think the relationship between Lincoln and Mary Todd has been portrayed in this?
Well, it looks like he trusts her a lot, and he seems to be henpecked by her, and he's more scared of her than he is of the rest of the American nation, to be honest. But she's quite feisty and stands up to him, and he kind of tolerates it, but is a bit scared of what, you know, of engaging her wrath.
Ken, what do you think?
Well, wherever it can take liberty with issues that we can't possibly know real details, it does, and where it comes to historical realities, it just blatantly, intentionally, willfully deceives the viewer. So I wouldn't be surprised if these kind of exchanges are so far from the truth that it bears no resemblance to anything that actually happened. But at the same time, I don't know enough about their personal relationship to say whether it's accurate or not.
Because there's another scene where, at the very beginning, where he has a dream and he discusses his dream with her. And so, what does this mean, I'm on a ship? And she says, oh, it's obviously the 13th Amendment. As if he discusses his dreams with her, because then Gloria Reuben turns around and says, oh, have you been discussing your dreams again with her? And you think, okay, would he have done that at that time? Did women have that kind of prominence even? Because there's a scene in the House of Representatives where they're saying, oh, you know, we're going to give blacks the vote. No, they all get up in arms. And then when they mention giving women the votes, goodness, the whole House gets to its feet and is in uproar. I mean, I laughed out loud because I thought, I can't believe that they think giving women the vote is far worse. Or, you know, I mean, it's both bad, but they were more outraged by that, frankly.
So in the House of Representatives, there's obviously a lot of, I guess, interaction, and the Republicans and the Democrats are actually at each other's throats. How do you think they've been portrayed? I mean, was it accurate, their view towards slavery?
Well, party politics obviously was a factor then as it is now, so that was definitely, you know, somewhat accurate, I'd say. But the truth of the matter is that the abolitionists were clearly in the minority. So this idea that all the Republicans were very much in agreement about freeing slaves and whatnot is again completely ridiculous. And so again, when we see these sort of debates and the idea that Republicans are for this and Democrats are against it, that's simply not true. The abolitionists, if you want to give credit to anyone in America for actually helping to bring about the end of slavery, or at least get that issue to the fore, it is a very small minority of abolitionists who really did stand for that, and it certainly wasn't Lincoln, that's for sure.
Now, somebody, I think an historian, accused the film of exaggerating the possibility that by January the war might have ended with slavery still intact. Do you think that's an accurate statement to make? It's
true, but the fact is that slavery would have ended one way or the other. In fact, it was becoming quite unprofitable. This was really, the Civil War was really sort of a tax revolt. The Union, the federal government, was exercising powers that were being abused, and those abusive powers were translating to higher taxes for the Southerners. And this was making life too difficult for them, and that is why ultimately they revolted. That's really what this was about.
And the wealth was actually in the South, the cotton mills, the plantations, but we're going to pause there. Let's move on to our final clip from the film. Okay, so Ken, do you think that Spielberg is guilty of presenting possibly a utopian vision of the US?
Yeah, it's perpetuating the myth, and the myth of America is freedom and democracy and so on and so forth. The fact is, it's an empire, it's the latest empire, like all other empires, it's falling, and it's going to continue to go down. What also in that scene, it shows another one of the lies, is that Lincoln was somehow a most adored and loved president. Actually, he was probably the most hated, certainly one of the most hated.
Mary Todd says this in the film to him, his wife. There's a scene where she says, you know, you're one of the most loved.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not true at all. And only after he was killed did you find some sympathy for him. But actually many people in America, in fact large numbers of people, would have celebrated his death. And he was in fact one of the most hated presidents. So this is just another blatant lie. You cannot say that is an accident. It's intentional. It's a willful intent to deceive the audience.
Well, I read an academic online said she was going to be using this film as part of an aid in her history classroom. So I thought, is this the version of events that is being presented to the future generation in textbooks?
Well, I think there are some good teachers out there who will teach a more accurate understanding, but largely, again, there is a cult protecting the myth of not only Lincoln, but the U.S. as a whole. So, of course, it would be no surprise at all that students are being cheated out of an understanding, a real understanding of history, and ultimately being told this sort of rubbish. And this will help perpetuate that kind of misunderstanding.
And I guess that's the that's the risk with these films, because if a US audience is a UK-based audience, for instance, is watching this, when you come out, what will their reaction be?
Well, the thing is, when I came out and saw this film, the first thing I did was Google Lincoln to find out, the truth behind it. So this could be an interesting tool so that people can go out and find out more about it and find out the reality behind the, as you said, the myth. So from that point of view, it'll spark debate, and maybe people will talk about it and look at it and get a better understanding of how it came about.
Now, with Zero Dark 30, we know some of the controversy surrounding the torture scenes led to many people, the Academy members should boycott it when it comes to voting. Do you think that will happen here with the inaccurate portrayal? We have had some historians in uproar, or like Ken, that is the lobby just too powerful?
It's Spielberg, no one's going to vote against him. He's one of them, and, it's a brilliantly acted film and beautifully shot and thought out. And so, no, I don't think so. And it's a performance-led film, you can't take away from Daniel Day-Lewis that, it's amazing what he's done, but then he always does that. So no, I don't think so. I don't think there'll be a backlash.
I think, Ken, you mentioned something earlier that, yes, the acting was superb, but if you'd done it with the accurate facts, it would have made it all the more better.
With that kind of resource, that kind of acting talent, the producers, everything that's involved in a movie of that magnitude, if it were done accurately, it would have been a hugely important and beautiful film. I'll agree, the acting, it's incredible, but if you had given the actors a real script that reflected an honest understanding of what really happened, then it would have been a magnificent film. But of course, Spielberg is not in the business of making historically accurate films. He's in the business of propaganda, and he's done it well once again.
So, the acting's good, but let's not go to it for our history lesson. We have run out of time. Let's stop there. Thank you to both my guests, and of course to all of you at home. If you'd like to get in touch, you can do so by emailing us at cinepolitics@presstv.co.uk, or you can join our Facebook fan page. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.